Welcome to Write Now Workshop Podcast, where you can write a book and change the world. This is episode 259, When Good Books Go Wrong, an interview with Liz Johnson, coming to you on Thursday, August 5th, 2021. So Liz is talking about her new book, Beyond the Tides, and how she originally had a plan for the story to go in this direction. But then when some things happened in her personal life, the story kind of went off the rails, and it actually became this other story, which was super duper good because I just read it. And so she's talking to us about what happened, how it happened, how she recovered, having the book go wrong, so to speak. But then the other thing is, I was so interested in every single thing that she said, because then she was also talking about her past as a publicist and the work that she does as a marketer and all this advice and stuff that she can give us as writers. And so I literally lost track of time. I kind of apologize, but honestly, you're going to find so much great information in this interview that it's only a half apology, but I will stop talking so that we can get into it because it is a long episode. Here is Liz talking about writing, publicity, marketing, and just everything that you could possibly be interested in talking to another writer about. You're going to love this interview. Today's guest is Liz Johnson. Liz is the author of more than a dozen novels, including the Georgia Coast Romance series and the Prince Edward Island Dream series, as well as a New York Times bestselling novella and a handful of short stories. She works in marketing and makes her home in Phoenix, Arizona. Welcome, Liz.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yes, it's so good to have you back. You were here last August as well, episode 208. If anybody wants to check it out, we were talking about research.
Yeah, that was so much fun. It was a great chat.
It was fun. I have to say, I feel like I make like a new friend every time I interview somebody. I'm like, you're so cool. I want to talk to you for like 2 more hours.
You must talk to so many interesting people. I think that this is such a cool gig to get to chat with authors all day. If I could do that, I would love that too.
Right.
Sounds so fun. Yeah.
It is a lot of fun. Though there are times when I look at my Facebook friends list. I'm doing something. I work with a business coach, and she wants to be kept up to date every quarter, like where my social media is at, so we know what we're going to do with it. And I'll look on there and I'll be like, okay, I don't remember, it might be 1,500 or something. And I'm just like, I know, like probably 5,000 or 10,000 people, but 1,500 people on my Facebook page. I'm looking over here because my computer, I have 2 screens open, but I'm just like, how many of those people do I really know, where I can look at their name and go, oh yeah, Liz with the cool books. And we had those fun talks, and she lives where I used to live, as opposed to some people I'm like, are you a friend of my husband's? Mm-hmm. Did you get married since I last knew you? Like, I don't recognize your name at all.
Yes. Yes. Unfortunately, I have exactly the same experience. Right. I'm like, did we meet in person at a conference, or do I just know you because you're friends with all of my other friends and I'm supposed to know you? I don't know. And I feel terrible because I'm awful with names. I'm just really bad with names. So I always feel terrible, but I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go with, we've definitely met before. And that's my new, like, it's so great to see you again, even if I have not met you in person. So I don't know. My apologies in advance if I ever meet somebody and they're like, we've not met. And I'm like, I'm so sorry.
It's great seeing you again. We haven't met, Liz.
Yeah. No, that definitely happened to me at, I think it was the last ACFW conference I went to when they were live and in person. Yeah. And of course, I knew the name Melissa Ferguson. She's a wonderful writer. She writes rom-coms. She's super funny. She's so great. And I knew that I was Facebook friends with her and that I had followed her and we had chatted and she's great. But so I met her at the last ACFW I was at, and she was like, well, we met last year. And I was like, we did? Because I don't remember that. I felt like such a jerk, but she's so gracious. And I was like, well, thankfully there's a lot of grace in social media, I think, for people who are like, I don't remember meeting you in person, but it's not you, it's me.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm usually more the other side. Like we'll go to events with my husband's work and he'll like squeeze my hand or nudge my shoulder in a way that nobody can see. And I know that it means I know them and I can't let them know that I can't remember their name because I work with them. So please introduce yourself. And like we have this whole system worked out now so that nobody really knows how bad John is with names.
That is brilliant.
It's good if you have like a partner in crime that you can work with.
Yeah. A wingman just to be at your side. That is perfect.
Exactly. Now, if you are by yourself though, I am going to not top your story so that I can be the coolest, awful person, but just to make you feel better.
Okay.
All right. At my last live in-person event, that was Mark Dawson's SPF Live conference in London. And it was the first annual. And of course, it was like 4 days before the whole world locked down. So about a third of the people decided not to come just in case, and the London Book Fair, it was supposed to be in conjunction with the London Book Fair canceled. And all of a sudden there was all these people standing around going, I don't know what to do with my time because I came here to go to all these things, but they still had the event. So I'm saying hi to people and taking business cards and finding out who's doing what and that sort of thing. And I introduced myself to Adrian. Where are you from? Oh, Austria. Oh, that's really cool. And then I'm getting ready to go outside to lunch. It's totally raining in London. And I'm walking next to somebody and I'm like, hey, I'm Kitty. What's your name? Adrian. Oh, really? Where are you from, Adrian? I'm thinking, did I just meet an Adrian? She's like, Austria. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I just said hello to you 5 minutes ago, didn't I? Guess what? A third time later. Hi, I'm Kitty.
Oh no.
I'm like, Adrian, do you have some sort of like Klingon cloaking device where you just look different when you put your coat hood on or something? Thankfully, she is awesome. And she just laughed every time. She's like, yeah, hi, I'm Adrian again.
Still Adrian, hasn't changed.
I'm still from Austria. Thankfully, we are actually really good friends now. So
that's great. Oh my gosh. See, that's a way to like, once you have those faux pas, then it's like, oh yeah, now our connection is solid. And I feel that way with Melissa. I will never forget her again because I will never forget meeting her again because, now I've had that experience of like, well, this was terrible. Sorry about that. And now you have a connection point and everybody remembers that, oh, this was awkward, but also now it's going to be great. We can be good friends.
Yeah. All right. So this is great. We're actually going to circle back to this in a moment. Everybody, what we're going to be talking about is a combination of marketing, connecting with readers, and also, some of the things that happen when it seems like everything is going to start out great on page 1 of your book, and then maybe doesn't quite go the way that you meant it to in the middle. So we're going to be talking about like the middle of the writer's life when things are sometimes going bad, but how we can bring it around to a strong finish.
Yeah.
All right. So let's just start with, if people want to learn a little bit more about like your backstory, your reader's backstory, and like how you got started and that sort of thing. We actually talked about it more in episode 208. So we'll just say, you're a published author. And you've got quite a few books out, working with one publisher. Yeah.
Multiple publishers.
Multiple. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So I started writing for Love Inspired Suspense.
That's where I saw your name, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I wrote 10 books with them. And in 2016, my first full-length trade contemporary romance released. And that was The Red Door Inn, set on Prince Edward Island. And and I wrote that book for Revell. And I've done, I'm working on book number 8 for them right now. And the book that comes out this August is book number 7 for them. So
okay,
yeah,
excellent. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about Beyond the Tide. So you and I are talking in May, just so people get a little confused listening to us. But this episode is going to air right after your book releases. So congratulations, you have a new book out.
Yay! Thank you. Yay! It feels great.
So tell us a little bit about Beyond the Tides, and then like what the story is about. It's the beginning of a new series, and then let's kind of segue into like what was it like writing this book?
Yeah. So Beyond the Tides is the story of Oliver Ross and Meg Whitaker. Meg Whitaker, her dad owns a lobster fishing business on Prince Edward Island, and that's a huge industry on PEI if you've ever been there. I remember learning what an important industry it was. It must have been my last visit to the island, which was in 2015, and it had snowed 25 feet of snow the year before. Wow. And I was like, I'm sorry, what do you do with that snow? PEI is a really tiny island. And I was like, oh, you just push it in the ocean. And they were like, no, we can't do that. We can't risk the fishing. Like, we cannot risk that we would, that there would be chemicals that would be pushed into the water that would harm the lobsters. And I was like, I did not think about that. And but it was like their response, their reaction for me was like, oh, this is a big deal here. And of course I knew that, like, there's lobster restaurants and stuff everywhere on the island, but lobster dinners are really popular. It's obviously an important industry, but it is like the industry on the island. It's like tourism, lobster fishing. Those are your things on Prince Edward Island. And so in Beyond the Tides, I focus on the lobster fishing side of things, which was so fun for me because I've actually been out on a lobster fishing boat with a lobster captain, Captain Mark. Wow. He does tours during the off season. So I've been on his boat and gotten to haul in a lobster, gotten to hold a lobster, almost dropped a lobster, like a few things like that. Like it's a little bit intense, but it's a lot of fun.
And I think I remember Meg doing some of these things in the book.
Yes, she does. So Meg has never wanted the fishing business. She's a teacher, she's a scientist, she does not want to be a fisherman. But when her dad announces that he's going to be selling the lobster business to her arch nemesis, Meg is not having it. She is just not up for this. And so she tells her dad, don't sell it to him, sell it to me instead. And of course, Oliver Ross, who was her high school arch nemesis, he ruined her chances for a scholarship 10 years before to an Ivy League school. And it was her chance to leave the island, to pursue her scientific dreams. And she has a heart for mechanical engineering, which, by the way, I don't know much about. So I had to do a lot of research on that. But so Oliver ruined her life in her mind and his mind. And so she left for college, but came back when her mom started to get ill. And as the book starts, the doctors still don't know what the diagnosis is. They're not sure what's causing her mom to fall regularly, to lose her memory, to have a hard time coming up with words, have a hard time communicating. There's just a lot of little things, like she can't make eye contact, and they're just not sure what it is, what's going on. And so Meg comes back to the island and has been there to help her dad care for her mom. Well, now her dad really just needs to focus on her mom. And so he's going to sell the business, and Meg isn't having it. So her dad, everybody just calls him Whitaker, comes up with this great idea. Hey, why don't you guys work the lobster business together for the summer? Well, I say summer, but it's really for the season. And it's about 2 months. You guys are going to work the business together, work the boat. And then at the end of the summer, I'll decide who's going to get the business. And so here we are, arch nemesis. She hates him. He knows he did her wrong all those years ago. And they have to spend 2 months together on a little tiny fishing boat with with one other deckhand. And so it's it's a fun, there's a lot of humor, there's a lot of heart to it. There's a lot of family relationships and dealing with family. And but it's mostly about forgiveness and finding just finding that love that heals wounds. And I loved writing that part of it, and just loved their relationship. And of course, it's a romance, so because that's what I write, and that's what I like to read too. Yeah. So that's kind of the gist of the story.
Nice. Yeah, it was really fun. And for people who, like me, had no idea where Prince Edward Island is, it's actually in Canada, right?
It is in Canada. It's on the East Coast. It's kind of northeast of Maine. So if you are American and familiar with the US geography, I always thought Maine stuck out into the ocean and just was out there, and it actually doesn't. Canada kind of wraps around it a little bit, and there's a little there's just a little bay north of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, and Prince Edward Island is the smallest province of Canada. It's just tucked up in there, just a little tiny island. It's got like about 125,000 permanent residents and lots of tourists.
Yeah,
yes.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. I have to say, the way you write it, I'm like, I should probably try to go there someday.
I like to say that like my dream job is to be on the PEI tourism board. I would really like for my whole job just to try and get people to visit PEI. Because
nice.
Ever since the first time I went, that's all I've done is, yes, you should definitely visit PEI. Let me tell you where to go. Here are the things to do. And I like to think of myself as like a would-be travel agent. Like if somebody reaches out to me and says, what should I do when I'm on the island? I have a whole list. I'm like, let me tell you, like they're going to tell you that you should go see this musical, but you shouldn't. You should go see Anne and Gilbert, the musical, because it's by far a better musical, and it's really sweet, and it's so cute, and it's always so well done. And and people are like, really? And I'm like, trust me. And then they come back and they're like, you were so right. And I'm like, thanks. I like to think of myself as an expert.
Yeah. So for everyone who's listening, thinking, yeah, I got to do that, there is a button on your podcast app where you can hit star or save, and you can save this episode and come back to it when you get to go. You'll be like, oh yeah. All right, Liz, what did you tell me to do? Okay, got it.
Exactly.
Nice. Okay, so I know last time you talked, you were excited to be writing back on this island again.
Yeah.
So you started book 1. You're excited to be back in Prince Edward Island in your mind.
Yes.
But then life didn't really go quite the way we all planned. I mean, COVID, a worldwide lockdown pandemic, but some other things were affecting your writing as well.
Yeah. So Beyond the Tides is actually the first book that I super did not make my deadline. I've been a few days late on my deadline before, but I'm pretty I got to hit that deadline. There's a real date there in my mind. And I remember my whole life kind of crumbled around me, and I thought, I can't write this book right now. Yeah. And thankfully my publisher was so kind and generous with me, and they were like, yes, of course, take the time that you need. So last April, I was sitting at my dining room table with the rest of the world working remotely. And it was a Friday afternoon, and I was just doing my stuff. And I get this call from my sister-in-law, and she says, hey, I just thought you would want to know that Dad's been rushed to the hospital, and he's in an ambulance right now. And I was like, thank you. I do want to know that.
Yeah.
And so I find out, so I immediately, I call my boss. I'm like, I'm gone. I'm done for the rest of the week. I'm going to visit my family. They live about 3.5 hours away. And I was like, I'm just going to go, and I don't know what to expect, but I'm going to go. So I ended up, talking to my mom shortly thereafter and finding out that my dad had, he'd just been sitting eating, and he collapsed, and he fell out of his chair and cracked his head open, broke his glasses, but his heart went into something called VFib, which is not compatible with life. It basically just means that it's a rhythm of your heart that your heart can't sustain it, and can't sustain your life. And so he sort of was in and out of that a little bit. And by the time he got to the hospital, he was laughing and joking, which is so his personality. And it was like, yeah, that's so my dad. And then that night I talked to him for like a minute on the phone. And the next day the hospital was calling us and saying, you need to come to the hospital right now. Things are going south.
Wow.
And it's like, my dad is in his early 70s, and he's had heart problems for years. This wasn't new, but it was so unexpected. It was so out of the blue. And so anyways, I was able to be there with my family. They ended up life flighting my dad to Phoenix, the closest big city with a heart institute. They put in a pacemaker. My dad is doing amazingly well now.
Oh, thank you, God.
Right. He still has, here we are more than a year later, he still has some nerve damage because they had to shock his heart 14 times to try and get it back into the right rhythm.
Wow.
And apparently those shocks to your heart don't just stay in your heart. They like go everywhere in your body. So he had nerve damage in his hands and feet. And so he's still, struggling with that, but his, just his outlook on life and his, pursuit to reflect God's love for other people and to point people to Jesus. Like, he just has been a huge example to our family. But while I was going through this, so anyways, my dad spent a week in the hospital in Phoenix, and then they released him to a rehab hospital for a couple of weeks after that. And then he moved back home. And I was staying with my mom through all of this. So I was kind of displaced from my normal schedule. This was prime writing time for me. And I was like, my book is not going to get done. So I was there with my family for about 5 weeks. And at that point, Dad was doing really, really well. And we were all just so thankful. But all of a sudden I looked up and I was like, yeah, they pushed my deadline back, but I still have to write a book.
Yeah.
I still have to get this done. And so I thought, hey, I had my storyline. I'm not really a plotter, but like, I knew like, oh, this is where we're going with the story. It's going to be great. And a lot of the framework of the story, some of the framework of the story stayed the same.
Yeah.
The lobster fishing business part, that all stayed the same, but family relationships within the story were much different. And originally I had planned that Meg Whitaker, the main character, was going to lose her mom. And after my dad's nearly losing my dad, I was like, nope, no, I can't do that. Yes, I cannot. I can't do that.
Yeah.
But it turned into kind of this struggle as I was dealing with, how do I love my dad and show love to my dad, invest in my relationship with him, and not knowing how much longer I'm going to have him, and like, it's such a morbid thing to think about, but it was my dad's, he calls it his episode, not an episode, definitely a heart attack or, cardiac arrest. It was such a wake up call of, I don't know how much longer I'm going to have him in my life. And so how do I live in light of that? Like, what choices do I make in my relationships with my dad and with my mom too, and with really everybody in my life?
Yeah.
Because isn't that the truth? Like, none of us are promised another day. Like, we're not promised anything. And so how do I live in light of that? How do I show them and invest in relationship with them? And that became really the heart of Beyond the Tides, that I did not know that was coming. I was like, I thought this was going to be a story about grief. And it, in some ways, like, and in dealing with loss, and in some ways it is, but it's kind of that extended, like, learning to grieve in a long process, like learning to cling to the person that you love and show them love, even though you don't, even though it's going to hurt more when you lose them.
Yeah.
And it just was like, that was not what I anticipated, but it ended up, I just remember I sent it to my publisher and or to my editor at my publisher. And I thought, I don't know what she's going to say about this book, because it wasn't exactly what I set out to write at all.
Yeah.
And as she sent it back, and the first word about a month later, she sent it back, and the first word in her email was "wow." And she's like, and I just was like, oh, okay, yeah. So I think it's coming across. Like, I think, like, I hope that I did justice to that theme, to really dealing with, because it was what I was going through in my life. And at the same time, like, here we are a year later, and I had to say to my dad, I was like, Dad, I'm going to be talking a lot about my book coming out. And are you okay with me sharing your story? Because it's your story as much as it's my story. And when all of that was happening, like, my mom and sister are very not social media kind of people. And so they didn't want anything on social media. So I was like, so cautious not to share, like, only to share with small individual groups, to say, would you be praying for my dad? Or, I just want you to know what's going on. This is why I'm not going to be attending group, or, whatever. And so it really, like, talking about this book is really the first time that I've talked publicly about what my family went through last year. And yet, and my dad was just like, he was so my dad, just typical my dad. He just made a joke and then was like, just make sure you say nice things about me. And I was like, of course I will, Dad. Like, the only not nice thing I'm going to say is, don't you dare do that again. You scared the daylights out of us. Yeah, so it really just was one of those things where it was like, I tend to want to write about what God is doing in my life, and like what he's teaching me, what I'm going through. But at the same time, I often find that usually it's like what I've already learned. And this, I was writing it while I was going through it. And it became much more therapeutic than anything else I've ever written before, because it was in the time frame that I was going through it, but I didn't have a choice, because it was like, I immediately knew I cannot write a story about losing your parent. Like, that is just, nope, I cannot do that right now. And so the rest of the story just really, it just, came so naturally out of what I was wrestling with myself, which is, how do I show my dad that I love him? And make memories that when he is gone, I have really fun things to look back on.
Right.
Really good times for us to remember, like, that I remember the laughter, that I remember the memories that we've made. And so that's really at the heart of the book.
Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to have you give some ideas, encouragement, or whatever to listeners is everybody has their own space where, when I'm in the middle of something, I have to write, or when I'm in the middle of something, I can't write. And then there's I'm in the middle of something and I kind of feel like maybe it would make me feel better, and I have a deadline, but I don't know. And so, for instance, when my mom was in the hospital and then she died, it was, I just kind of said, I kind of threw my hands up in the air metaphorically. And I was like, I'm not doing anything except for just be with my family. And so it was really hard. The writing took forever to get back into it, because then after she died, then I was doing that same thing that you were talking about, where I just felt like I needed to make sure every single person I cared about, which is, quite a few people,
a lot of people,
knew, just so you know, just so we're clear, I love you and I think you're awesome. And it just kind of, I don't know, it took some time, and it was months before I was writing. So again, that book definitely did not come out when I thought it would. So what are some of the, in the middle of it, today's the day that I'm, today I woke up and I decided I am or I am not going to write. Like, in those hard times, what are some of the things that might be encouragement or helpful bits to other people, do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, just giving yourself permission to be right where you are. And So maybe that is, I can't write right now. Like, I just can't write right now. And that's okay. Like, everyone will understand. And for me, it was my publisher saying, like, I'm going to miss my deadline. Like, I'm going to tell you that right now. I'm going to miss my deadline. And that is what it is. And you know what? Nobody at my publisher was mad. Nobody. Everybody was like, we understand. And the same with readers. Like, if you have readers expecting a new book from you at such and such a date, they'll understand. Like, that's not worth you pushing through in a time where you're really aren't able to write. I think you do a disservice. I think we all do a disservice when we push through and write in times where we're not emotionally available to put that into the story. Yeah. And as you said, like, after you lost your mom, it was all about focusing on those other relationships. Yeah. For me, it was, how do I invest with my dad? How do I dive into that relationship? As well as other ones, but that was most important for me. So for 5 or 6 weeks, it was all dad all the time. Yeah. Even though it was during COVID. And so I'm standing outside his rehab hospital window, like, hey, dad, like, because I couldn't see him.
Right. I forgot, even though we're in the middle of it still, I still forgot. Oh man.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It was pretty rotten. But I totally empathize with others who, their loved ones are in the hospital and you can't be by their side. And it's so painful. So give yourself permission to be where you are. And for some writers, writing is therapy, and it regularly is. So whether that's journaling, or whether it's storytelling, or whether it's just writing out what's going on. My mom is she's not a fiction writer, but she leads Bible studies. And I find her writing regularly because she's collecting all the information for Bible study. And I'll look and she's got 15 pages, just for Bible study. And I'm like, that's impressive, Mom. But during my dad's time in the hospital, she was journaling every day. And part of it was for her to be able to, when my dad was ready, to say, this is what happened. Like, if you want to know, these are the facts, but also here's how your family rallied together. Here's how your friends rallied together. Like, here's the people who love you so much that they dropped everything and came to Phoenix, even though they couldn't go to the hospital to
see you. Oh, wow. Yes. Wow.
Just because they wanted to be near, And so it was like, so for my mom, it was journaling. And that was really therapeutic for her, I think. And so I think, like, wherever you as a writer are at, like use your writing when you're ready, as you're able, as it's helpful to you, because we're all individuals.
Yeah.
And so I think the biggest thing I can say is just take the pressure off. Don't succumb to the pressure of feeling like you need to produce in a time where your spirit is wounded and you're struggling. Allow yourself to begin to find healing. And sometimes that healing does come through writing. So I won't say don't write. Just like, follow how your spirit is leading and how you feel like God is leading you. If you're feeling like I have to produce just for the sake of producing, even though I can't do it right now, like, just let yourself off the hook. That's, I think, what I would say.
And I think one of the things that I wanted to add was, it's very difficult. This is me speaking. It's very difficult for me to not assume, based on the way somebody said something, it's very difficult for me not to assume that they're judging me, that they're trying to shame me, that my decision is different from them. So I'm not really sure how to help other people in actual steps, but I do want to encourage you. If you're somebody who you need to write through the pain and it helps you, my goodness, don't let anybody like me try to shame you into, you should be spending time with whatever.
Right.
And if you're the other person and you can't write now, don't let anybody shame you into, like, this is all about you dealing with life in the best way that you can. And so when we have friends who are going through anything, big things or small things or whatever, I think it's important for us to remember times that we felt that maybe somebody was unintentionally or intentionally trying to make us feel shame, and try to remember like not to use our words or our facial expression or whatever in a way that we might accidentally be doing that to the people that we love too, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We are all individuals and we're all going to process things differently. And so, I mean, as writers, when God's put words in our hearts, like, yeah, that's a way that we process things a lot of times. And so if that's what you feel like you need to do, then by all means go for it. Yeah, I think it's just test yourself, like check your own heart. What do I need to get through this? What would be helpful in processing this? And then follow that, and don't compare yourself to how others have processed.
Exactly.
Because we're individuals.
Yeah. Okay, so Liz, I'm going to let you decide where you want to go from here, because I see a fork coming up in the road.
Sure.
Between the two of us, we thought of enough stuff to talk about for probably 2 or 3 hours, but that's possibly too long for an episode. So. So I can see two really great things to kind of segue into. One is when you know that you're now behind in deadlines and stuff, like what do you do? And when you realize that you're going to change part of the book, this is not going to be what even if you're not a plotter, what you mentally imagined the book was going to be, what do you do? So that's one thing. Or we were talking about marketing and how we actually can connect with our readers by sharing some of the hard times in our lives and not just making everything look beautiful. So I'll let you decide, which direction you want to go here. What do you think would be?
Sure.
Both of them would be helpful to listeners. So I'll let you kind of go.
Sure. Well, I think probably for the answer to the first fork option for me was really simple, and it simply was when as I started to heal and as I needed to process things, I just sat back down and I started writing again, and that was the right time for me. And so, yes, I was on deadline still. Yes, I needed to produce. Yes, I had to continue to push myself. But ultimately I found that I wanted to process what I had been through. And so the writing helped with that. And so the faster I wrote, the more I processed. And so that worked out well for me.
Nice.
I don't really have specific tips for that. So I will say, that I think that on the marketing side, I think that our wounds and our brokenness, that's where we meet people. That's where we connect with people. That's like when I think about, social media, Instagram posts that, are picture perfect every time. Those aren't the people that I feel like I can connect with. And those aren't really the people that I want to hear their stories. Like I'm like, your story is perfect. Great. Mine's not. I don't know. So I tend to be someone who I was a publicist for 4 years, and then I worked in book marketing for another 6. And I loved working in the publishing industry. And one thing that I always tried to focus on as a publicist was telling your story, not the book's story, because the book is important and is wonderful and is encouraging and hope-filled, and it is full of maybe it's an escape, maybe it's an adventure, maybe it's it's going to provide all these wonderful things for your reader. But at the end of the day, what the reader really wants is the author. They want to know the author. They want to feel like they have a connection with them. And the only person who can give the reader the author is the author. And so you have to share part of your story. Now, please hear me. I'm not saying that you have to share the worst thing that's ever happened to you, or that you have to unpack secrets that are just for you, or just for you and a select few. But when we share our heartbreak, when we share our trials, I think that's when, that's what people connect around. When I think about my friends, we're not friends because we always laugh together. We're friends because we've walked through divorces, and we've walked through child loss, and we've walked through pain, and we've walked through parental loss, and we've walked through really hard times together. And that's why we're friends, because we've walked those hard times. We've also laughed together, and we've watched silly movies together. And, so there is balance there, but we wouldn't have the depth of relationship without that moment of brokenness. And I think that that's where people connect. And so when you're trying to connect with readers, and if you put on a facade that says, my life is perfect and everything is great, and I've never struggled a day in my life. I was an overnight success. Look at my great book that sold a gajillion copies. And, I'm the next J.K. Rowling or whoever, that's great. I don't really want to be friends with that person. I don't want to know more about them, because inside I'm going, okay, the jealousy is rearing its ugly head. And I'm like, why didn't that happen for me? But when I have a conversation with someone who's real, or even when they share something on social media that is like heartbreaking, like I think about two of my author friends right now who are walking very different, but very painful roads. I think about how they're expressing that in social media, and I'm just in awe of them, because, and I'm like, I want to be more like them, not just because they're great writers, but because they're wonderful women who are figuring out how to walk these hard things in life, and to do so with hope and grace and faith. And those are all things that I want to emulate. So yeah, for me, I just keep going back to, like, it's hard for me to talk about what my dad went through, what my whole family went through.
Yeah.
I'm getting a little misty over here. Sorry about that, guys.
But, you had me crying from the beginning. So I was like trying to pretend that I wasn't wiping away my.
I've got my tissue over here just in case things go, but I'm going to try to keep it from like ugly cry, keep from doing an ugly cry. But but I just think like that's like, like those points are the things that we connect with and connect on. And I often, sorry, I feel like I'm rambling about this, but I'm so passionate about this topic, because I find like it has, long before I went through this with my dad, I even think about like the hard things in my writing career, and that those are areas where I connect with both readers and other writers about. And so a couple years ago, I was asked to write a blog post for a blog that sadly has closed its doors. But it was called Seriously Write. And they asked if I would write an encouraging blog post. And I was like, oh, I don't have anything encouraging to say. And I thought, okay, all right. Like, what do I want to say? What do I say? And around that same time, I had started noticing something new showing up on all of my books. And I was like, this is different. And so I told that story in my, in this blog post. And I don't tell it to brag. It's hard to say this without sounding like I'm bragging. But what I want to start by saying is I wrote a book in 2013 that it was like the book of my heart. And I loved this book. And it was my book. It was like, it was the book that God had put on my heart. And I loved this story. I know I loved it because I wrote it in 6 weeks. Guys, that's never happened before.
Right. Wow.
But I'll tell you why I wrote it so fast is because an editor at a very nice publishing house was interested, and she was going on maternity leave. And so my agent said, we got to send it to her before she goes on leave. And I said, sure, no problem. Let me write. So it was like, I worked all day, I wrote all night. And in 6 weeks, I had this finished manuscript. She passed on it.
Oh,
we sent it out to other publishers. I got some really nice rejections. I got some really not nice rejections. Like, oh, the concept is really good, but the results, like the finished product is not good. And I was like, well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
That makes me feel super warm and fuzzy. Ultimately, I was like, everybody passed on it. Nobody wanted to publish it. I was heartbroken. And I just said, okay, God, I'll go back and I'll keep, I was already writing. I was already published at the time, and I was writing for Love Inspired. And I said, okay, I'm going to go back and keep writing my Love Inspired books. But this was the story of my heart. And I was like, God, what's going on? And I was so heartbroken. And a year later, like almost a year to the day later, my editor at Revell called my agent and said, hey, is that book still available? The Red Door Inn. And I said, and my agent said, yes. And the editor said, great, I'd like to take it to pub board. and
just like, out of the blue.
You already passed on it. And she's like, I know, but contemporary romance is selling more now. The industry has changed a little bit. Like, I'd like to give it a go. And I said, okay. So I sold it to Revell, and in a 3-book deal. I had no clue. And then I'm going to be real honest, it did not go real well. The first 6 months were pretty mediocre sales. And I just thought, oh, this is not good. And then my publisher put it on sale, put it in a BookBub, and it took off. And all of a sudden it started hitting bestseller lists. It was a finalist for a Christie Award. It was a finalist for another prestigious award. I earned out my advance. It just was like thing after thing after thing. And I was like, what? Nobody wanted this book, right? Yeah. This was my biggest failure. This was like the book that I was like, this is the book of my heart, but nobody else cares. And I thought, this is the worst. And yet all of a sudden, and now all of my books carry a little tiny line under my name that says Liz Johnson, best-selling author of The Red Door Inn.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, oh, right. It's that book that I thought was a failure. I thought I was a failure. I thought this is never going to happen. And yet God's timing was right and good. And because of that, like now I have this little best-selling author tag on my, and it continues to sell. I look around sometimes and I'm like, why is that book that came out 5 years ago still selling better than many of my other books? I don't know, but it's a book that people connect with. And so I wrote this. Okay. So all of that to say, I wrote this blog post about that experience and about discovering that all of a sudden this book that I thought was a failure was not. And this experience that was so hard for me to walk through at the time so I write this blog post about that, and they post it, and it becomes the best, like the most read blog post of their year. And I was like, oh, it's because people want to hear that they're not alone in their trials and their struggles. They want to know that there is hope. And it's like, I don't say any of this because I'm some great writer, or that I did something like magical or found just the right formula to, for my book to do well. I say it only because God has a plan and a purpose and the right time. And I'm convinced of that. I feel strongly of that. And I lean into that because I know that, that life is hard and that we do go through trials. But when we can look to somebody else and say, you know what, they went through a hard time too, and they survived, they're still here and they're still with us. And the pain is real. It's real. But so is the hope. And so I choose to cling to the hope, and I want to demonstrate that and share that. But I also want to share the heartaches, because I think the heartaches don't mean it, the hope doesn't mean anything without the heartaches. And so that's really been my story all along, to say, that the pain is where we connect. And so don't be afraid to share your pain. Don't feel like you have to put forth a facade that says my life is perfect. I never deal with pain, because that's not real. Yeah. And when you think about it, those aren't the books we write or the books we like to read. Like, I would hate reading a book. I did read a book once. It was like a novella. And I thought, oh, this looked like a fun, just a little rom-com novella, whatever. There was zero conflict and zero pain. And I hated it. And I was like, this isn't what I want to read. What I want to read is somebody overcoming their struggle, their pain, the conflict. And it looks different, depending if you're writing women's fiction versus nonfiction, versus a rom-com. Like whatever you're writing, it's going to look a little different, but ultimately that's real. We want to represent real life, and real life has pain.
Yeah. That's really great, because it's hard sometimes for people. Like I have a little group called Finish Your Book. It's a membership group. We do writing sprints together, guest speakers, and the whole point in the book coaching program I have called Finish Your Book. Like the point is to actually finish. And there are so many times when we get caught up in something. I was telling one of my writing group friends yesterday. I have a writing group called Imaginary Friends. So I was meeting with one of my imaginary friends yesterday. I love
so great.
That. She's in Phoenix. I should introduce you guys.
Oh, I would love that.
Oh, okay. I'm totally going to do it after. So anyway, I was talking to her, and I started writing back in the day before self-publishing, where agents and editors were like, never write a series. If you don't sell book one, there's no point in writing the others. So I had like 3 book ones, and then some of my friends went into self-publishing, and the ones who weren't the brown nosers trying to do good and follow the rules people, they had 2 or 3 series of books, and they like took off like hotcakes, and I was like, oh, now I have 3 series started because I had 3 single books. And then I look back and ask myself, well, what am I going to work on next? Well, the one book I stopped working on because my husband was in a terrible motorcycle accident. Oh. And I was like, I couldn't open that file without crying for like a year, because all it reminded me of was the phone call, you understand. Yes. The other one, I done something terrible and stuck one story inside the timeline of another story in the series. So the book 1 goes from like April to June, but book 2 goes from the previous December to the following December. And I'm like, oh crap, I didn't think about like, how am I going to do it? So I've rewritten the beginning of that a couple of times just to find like the logical way to tell the story. But then I'm talking to Shauna and I'm like, okay, but the thing is that I've got the same number of books in each of these series. And if I change from my third person, which is this series, to first person, which is this series, like it's going to take me some time, and I won't be able to get that out of my head for a while. So I might as well just keep writing in first person till I finish the series. So, oh my goodness, these are the sorts of things that it's you think to yourself, my gosh, don't share, don't let anybody know like the struggle.
Right.
But then people can't connect with you. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm part of a writers group here in Phoenix, and I guess we're at 6 now, 6 regular attenders. And we have a few who live in kind of distant parts of the city. And if you've ever been to Phoenix, it takes an hour and a half to get across town sometimes. And so, so we have a few who, pop in when they're able, but so there's 6 of us ladies, and we're in various stages of our publishing careers. We've got a few traditionally published. We've got some who are like querying their agents right now. And that's super fun and exciting. Sometimes I feel like a big sister, like I'm like cheering them on, like, yeah, this is so great. And we have some who haven't even finished their first manuscript yet. Like they're still working on it, and that's okay. But the fun part is that we're able to, to like be real about the challenges of having a writing career. And so far we haven't scared off the ones who are still working on their first book, which is super good, because, because there are real hard things, and like real things to consider, and real things that are just challenging. And like, oh man, like I totally screwed this up, or I can't believe I did this, or, we can share that with each other. And I have found that it has built our relationship so much more than it ever would have if we just pretended, I always have all the answers and I totally get it right all the time and I never mess up. And
I finish every book I start.
Yes. Oh yeah. Like my first book was fantastic. No, it wasn't. Or I've never embarrassed myself at a conference and spoken to the wrong person, or, no, we all have. And it's those like faux pas, it's those mistakes that make us human, but also give us make us connect with other people, because it's a lot more fun to laugh at ourselves about, silly things that we've done, or stupid things that we've done, than it is to put on that facade of, I've got it all together. No problem. Like, oh, I went through this horrible tragedy, but I was still able to write. Like, if you were able to write through a horrible tragedy, God bless you. Like, that's amazing. But for most of us, maybe not the case. And so, like, maybe we still open a file and it still brings tears to our eyes. Like, I will never be able to reread Beyond the Tides, like the whole thing again. I don't think I could. I went through it, I don't know, a dozen times throughout the editing process. And by the time I was done, I was like, this makes me cry every time. I don't think I can do this again. Just because it's still, like, it still brings up all those memories of as I was writing it. And so, but I think, man, I think being real with each other, with other writers and other readers, is so important. It just makes for better relationships. And ultimately, I think it finds us more readers. Like, I hate to be that person who's, like, oh, always looking for new readers. But at the end of the day, like, we are looking for new readers.
It's our job.
Like, like, hopefully we've written something that we love and are so passionate about that we recognize that it is going to meet readers in a special place, that it's going to help them in some way. And I know that, like, a lot of authors hate to market themselves, and it's tough. Like, I'm with you guys on that. But as a book marketer for years, what I learned was not to focus specifically on the book, but on what does the book do for the reader? Like, what benefit is in it for the reader? Because marketing is just all about, telling the right story at the right time to compel somebody to take an action. But also, we know in marketing that people are innately selfish. Like, we're thinking about what's in it for me. And that's true. We're humans, right? Like, we're born selfish. And so we're thinking, what, oh, maybe I want to read this book, but what's really in it for me? Now, if I'm looking at a book, I want to know that it's there's going to be a little romance. I want there to be a kissing scene, and not just like a peck kissing scene. I want a good kissing
like a
scene.
good kiss.
But I also know that I don't swing all the way to the end of that romance spectrum. So I'm going to go with, sweet romances or inspirational romances. Like, so tell me that that's what I'm going to get, because that's what I want. That's what I'm looking for. Or maybe your reader is somebody who, like, wants to go on an adventure but can't. Then you've got sci-fi and fantasy and, these great spec fiction novels that are taking you to imaginary places that are so cool. And so, so when you share, like, what the reader is going to get out of your book, then it becomes not, here, buy my book, but instead it becomes more about what you have to offer them, which is a great read, which is something that they can really enjoy, that will take them to where they want to go. And if you don't know where they want to go or what they want to do, ask them. That's,
Yeah. And when you've got those little stories, people ask me, but I know I should start a newsletter, but I don't know what to put in it. And, and so with my finish your book group, I was like, you guys, I'm going to have a newsletter session with you, because I really think that all of you are in a place where, even though your book's not out yet, like, it's going to be out soon enough that today's the day. And so a lot of it was, but I wouldn't know what to say. And then I went through, like, this whole, not so much a list, but I'm like, these are all the things that people are interested in life in general. Think about all the things that you're interested in other people's books, the books that you love the most, and also the authors that you, like, really follow. Like, why do you follow them? Like, what did they say that makes you be like, I love this comic book author, Mark Waid. I love his work. I love the storytelling that he does. I love the way he tells a story. Even though, like I never would have imagined that I would be reading picture books, as an
Right.
adult, essentially.
Yes.
So by the time we went through like 15 minutes of this and they started writing, and then, somebody was like, well, I just wrote down enough things for like 12 months. And somebody else was like, I think I'm going to have to make my newsletter be twice a month because I have like 24 or 5 things. Because then they started realizing, like, what do you love? So I'm like giving a little tip here too. Like, what do you love in your favorite authors, and how did they make you love them so much? Like, those are some of the things that you can share with the people. Listening to you tell how you changed Beyond the Tides. I'm just looking to make sure I say the right. I'm like the lobster book. That's how I have it in my head. Listening to you say how that you changed Beyond the Tides because of what was happening in your life when you're writing it, I was like, oh, that makes the book so much more interesting to me. So like these little things, even if it's not like, that's kind of what I would say is a big story, but there's also little stories. Like I decided that I was going to put this other kind of dog in the book instead of this kind of dog, because I actually dog sat a dog like just like this. And so I'm going to use Harper as, like you can tell your readers and they'll be like, oh, that's cute. Do you have a picture?
Yes, exactly. I actually have taught a workshop several times about how to be your own publicist, but basically like how to write articles and find homes for them based not on your book, but on the things that surround your book. So like if you're writing Regency era romance, you should be writing blog posts for Jane Austen, like blogs out there, and there are a gajillion of them. Like for me, I love Prince Edward Island, Anne of Green Gables, anything like that. So if you're looking for me to, like, if you're visiting my social media page, you're probably going to find that, oh, she's sharing more PEI pictures because it's gorgeous. And or when I was writing about the Georgia coast, I was like, anytime I would find an interesting article about something like that, I was sharing about that. For example, I had a whole book about where a hurricane uncovered a sword handle. And just like a few months after that book came out, there was an article on CNN about how a hurricane had brought up some Civil War cannonballs, had like uncovered them. And I was like, see, all sorts of things are found through hurricanes, And so like, just like finding things that are currently being talked about in the media, that's like a really great way to like connect with people. It was so funny. I was teaching that workshop at a RWA conference, Romance Writers of America. Well, it wasn't a conference, it was like a local meeting. And there were probably like, I don't know, like maybe 50 authors in the room. And somebody piped up and was like, I write about dragons. I don't know how I could ever connect, what could I possibly talk about with dragons? And I was like, well, and at the time I was like, Game of Thrones is like, their last season is starting like right now. Maybe you could talk about what to do between Game of Thrones episodes, because there's a good chance that Game of Thrones fans might also like your book, depending on whatever, but there's a dragon tie-in there. Or, just what is the media currently talking about? I think about my friend Rachel Hauk, who
oh yeah, Rachel's been on the show.
Yes. Oh, she's fantastic. I adore her. But she has written this whole series and has a new series about royalty. And I remember when William and Kate got married, like media was always looking for some way to cover that. No, it wasn't William and Kate. It must have been Meghan and Harry when they got married.
That was just a couple years ago.
It's just a couple years ago, right? And I remember she was invited to like write an article about royal etiquette, like etiquette at a royal wedding. She was considered a royalty expert because she'd written some fiction about it. But I was like, this is great. Like they had like a little book cover of her book. They had like, her picture on there. Her bio said author of, like listed her royalty books. And I'm like, this is perfect because people who care about the royal wedding are interested in reading books about royalty, even if they're fake royalty. The chances of your overlap in your audience there are huge. So, look for the things that that the media is already talking about, or that other people are already talking about? What's in the social conscience? Now, unfortunately, the last year has not had a lot of really happy, fun things to talk about.
Yeah.
But if you did happen to have a book about, some terrible contagious disease, like with a hopeful ending.
Yeah. Diane Mills' book, Airborne, came out right at the beginning of the pandemic. I was like, I hope this is good for you and not bad for you.
Seriously. But yeah, I love to look at like what's in the public interest, or what's a way to take what you're writing and kind of turn it on its head a little bit. I always think about, I was privileged to be the publicist for Cindy Woodsmall for a few years. And Cindy she used to write Amish fiction, and now she's doing a little bit more kind of contemporary women's fiction. But she had lots of Amish friends and would go visit them every year, and was really kind of deep into the Amish culture and so knowledgeable about that. And it was coming up on Christmas, and she had written her first Amish Christmas novella. And I said, let's pitch you to some women's magazines, because I think it'd be really fun for you to talk about how the Amish celebrate Christmas. Like what is something that Englishers like me could take away from how the Amish celebrate to make my Christmas even better. And it was, they were simple tips, keeping things very simple and homemade and things like that, but they were really cute and great things. Anyways, we did a sidebar and published it in Hope for Women magazine, and it went like gangbusters. And but the title of my pitch was Party Like the Amish. Because I thought, you know what, turn it on its head, make people think about things in a little different way to grab their attention. But at the end of the day, you've provided something really practical for your, to help people out. And I think newsletters are also a great place to hey, I write Amish fiction, or I write fiction from a specific, area or something. And this is how we would celebrate this holiday. Or maybe you don't celebrate, maybe you're writing something in New Orleans. And for the rest of for somebody like me, I've never lived in New Orleans, but I'm curious about Mardi Gras. What if you how to celebrate Mardi Gras when you're not there? Why do you celebrate Mardi Gras? I don't have any clue, but those are things that that other people might be really interested in, that you could totally pack into your newsletter. Sorry. Yeah. Bunny trailed on that.
No, this is exactly the sort of, you took both forks. You were not Frost. What's Frost's first name?
Robert.
I'm like, he's my favorite poet. Yeah, you were not Robert Frost and took one path. You took both, which is great. Two. I love it. That's what writers
backtracked on myself, and
that's right. So just to remind readers, what are you interested in? What's happening in your life, and what are you interested in other of your favorite authors' lives? And then how can you give your readers things that would be interesting to them? Yes. And think about, you can put these things in your newsletter, in your social media, and you could pitch magazine articles and get your name out in front of thousands more people.
Yes.
These are awesome tips, Liz. I love them. You've given me an idea. I think, I don't know if you remember, I didn't read romance in high school. I wasn't really interested in it. I liked Stephen King and Dean Koontz. I read all of their books in high school. And but I remember seeing the back cover of a Barbara Cartland novel, and the entire back cover was a picture of her that was basically the 1970s version of a glamour shot. Do you remember glamour shots?
Yes.
And I was just looking at her going, she looks like the queen of something. That does not look like a book I want to read,
No.
So I was thinking, so I'm going to find that picture, and I'm going to put it in my newsletter, and I'm going to put like a circle and an arrow, and then, the text that looks like it's handwritten. And I'm going to put, this is not me.
Also, this will never be my author photo. I'll never take an author photo like this.
If you guys are listening and you're like, what in the world? Just Google Barbara Cartland author photo. I'm sure it will come up. She's on a Chase lounge, and
any 80s romance authors, that was their go-to, was the glamour shots with the kind of the hazy background and the big bangs and big hair, and and everybody had off the shoulder ball gowns for some reason. I don't like, were they just selling those at JC Penney's back in the day? And that was the thing. I don't even know. But yeah, I definitely know that when I was of age to begin reading, more adult romance novels, I remember seeing those regularly going, what is going on? And then when I had to do my first author photos, I was like,
yeah,
that is not for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Though I did have, so my author photos, the last official photos I had were taken at the beach because I lived in Carlsbad, California. And I was like, well,
fun.
Of course my pictures are going to be taken at the beach.
Yeah.
And so the one that I've been using, golly, it's been more than 5 years. And, between time and age and me getting just sick and tired of having to color my hair like every 4 weeks because my brown hair was turning white. And then the pandemic and not being able to go out anyway, I'm like, okay, so except for like the last inch of my hair, this is actually my natural hair color now for the first time in 20 years. But my author photo, my hair color is more like your current color. And so this little girl about 10 years old, I handed her mom my business card and she looked at it and she looked up at her mom. She goes, why is her hair a different color? And I was like, my darling, unfortunately, you will learn the answer to that in about 30 years.
Yep. Just wait. It's coming. Yeah.
Okay, this has been so much fun. We've probably talked too long, but I really think there's a lot of great information in here for people to dig into.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been a blast. And thank you for letting me share just all the things on my heart, because there are many.
Yes. And just to remind people, this is what our readers want. Yeah.
So don't be afraid to share. Don't be afraid to, just to open yourself up. Again, keep your boundaries. Don't feel like you need to share things that are just for you. But But don't be afraid to be real and be authentic, because that's what readers want. They want authors, and nobody can give them that but you.
Exactly. And if you're wondering, but I don't know exactly where my boundaries are, you could start with something that I learned in my business program. I mean, I hadn't heard it before, to teach or speak from your scars, not your gaping wounds. So that could be helpful.
Yes. Oh, that's wise. That is so wise.
I like it. I have sometimes spoken from my gaping wounds and then later went, why did I say that out loud? I'm so embarrassed.
Oh, no. Oh, and the truth is, though, that people are, people I'm sure connected with that, because we all have gaping wounds. We all have hard things. And so I'm sure people connected with that. But share what you're ready to. Like if this book had come out 6 months ago, I wasn't ready to talk about it. I wasn't ready to share. And now here we are, a little more than a year since my dad's cardiac arrest. And I still have areas where I'm like, oh, that still stings a little bit, but it's definitely much more scars than it is that gaping wound. But man, that gaping wound was huge for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is beautiful. Thank you so much. Because it's hard sometimes to even share these things in the context of I'm trying to help you to have some ideas. And so thank you.
Yeah. Oh, my pleasure. I really hope that this is helpful just for you to think about what you want to, as authors, what you want to share, what it is that you can share, what it is that you have that's going to help you connect with other people. Because the more that you connect with them, the more they're going to want to connect with you through your writing.
Excellent. Oh, I love it. And I'm sure people are going, well, now I want to connect with you, Liz. So where can people find you, connect with you, find your books?
Yeah. So my website is lizjohnsonbooks.com. And that's all my books are on there. Info about me, FAQs. You'll find out that I once worked at Disney World, things like that. But also I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of them are at Liz Johnson Books.
Perfect. So easy.
Yep.
Yay.
I don't spend much time on Twitter. So check me out on Facebook. That's really where I spend most of my time.
All right, good. Yes, actually, I was there yesterday and I was like, look at all these beautiful pictures of Prince Edward Island.
I'm on a kick.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. It's been great having you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's always a joy to talk with you, Kitty.